The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Yeah. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday. It is April 27th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us. Georgia opened up over the weekend, and despite all of our here in Atlanta, we just did everything we could. We warned as many people as we could. We sent the word out across social media. Churches got the word out that they should stay home. Video and photos are emerging from the weekend where Atlanta was enjoying a hot Atlanta spring night all through the weekend. And from the looks of it, well, you know, maybe they'll be okay. Maybe no one. Maybe they're like no asymptomatic people in that crowd whatsoever. The various crowds across the state. It's not just black people. I don't even know if I mentioned that that the video and the photos that I'm referencing are particularly black. But it's not just black people. All across this state, indeed, all across the country, states that have decided to open up, people went. Which makes me wonder, it really does make me wonder something else about our society. Can we make it without the strong arm of government telling us what to do? I mean, I know a lot of us are sheltered in place and we're doing the very best that we can. We're doing all that we can. We didn't need the government to tell us to shelter in place. We didn't need the government to tell us to rearrange our lifestyle and try to find a way to make money from home and cut down our consumption. We just did it because we knew it was the best thing to do. But when the other half of society is so hell-bent on continuing participating in this system that really has done nothing for them, there's literally nothing out there. There's nothing out in this economy for 99% of us. Most of us are just mindless automatons. And I know that's insulting. I don't mean it to be insulting. But most of us just go every single day, 9 to 5, 9 to 9, overnight. We just constantly go, and then we constantly consume. We spend up everything that we make. We give them our labor. We give them our income. We give them our taxes. We give them our time, our energy, and our participation. And what do we get in return? Nothing. Well, now what do we get in return? COVID-19. So I am really curious. We'll ponder on this in the Patrons episode. We'll stargaze a little bit and discuss the implications of whether or not humanity is intelligent enough to be able to guide itself without the strong hand of a government. Whatever government, right? Now, all governments are corrupt in some form or fashion, so it's not about advocating for a particular style of government. It's the question of whether or not we can handle ourselves. Could we survive without someone over us telling us to stay our asses home? Apparently, for some of us, we can't. And because of the nature of this virus, those of us who can't regulate ourselves without the government telling us what to do, all of us are impacted by it. Libertarianism doesn't really do much for you in this kind of a circumstance, but I digress. Welcome to the show, everybody. That was just a good morning and the hello to you. This is an exciting episode. I had a chance to speak with Professor Emeritus of Pennsylvania State University, none other than the outstanding Professor Adolph Reed, a friend of the show. He's been on the show several times, and every time we have him on the show, it is a robust conversation. So I will be bringing you parts of that interview through today's episode. The full episode was delivered to the full interview, uncut, unedited, was delivered to patrons on Saturday, shortly after we recorded it. So if you want access to the uncut full, I think it's like 49 minutes worth of an interview, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and get access to that. You will get portions of it here in case you're not prepared to become a patron, and I totally get it. That's fine. All right. In other news, or rather concurrent news, global confirmed cases of COVID-19 is quickly approaching 3 million, 206,000, about 207,000 deaths so far. The U.S. we are quickly approaching 1 million infections confirmed. That number is probably 10 times higher for those who don't even know they had it. have it because we are not testing. And right now we're approaching 55,000 total deaths in less than 5 weeks. I still want to see the faces of the people who swore up and down that this was just the flu. On average, I think about 60,000 people die every year from the flu. We have about 60,000 who have died in 5 weeks, an average of 2,000 people every single day. Governor Cuomo is saying that he's planning on reopening New York starting May 15th. That's utterly ridiculous. New York is the epicenter here in the United States. Atlanta is going to be right behind it soon. But right now it is New York, and the governor of New York is talking about opening it up because you know what? They've decided a long time ago. They decided very quickly. Very early on in this process, they decided that it was more important to try to preserve this. Nope. Let me correct myself. It's not about preserving this economy because this economy is going to tank regardless because people are dying. And there are going to be those of us who refuse to go out and consume at the levels that we used to consume at. A lot of us are going to refuse to do that. So the economy is going to tank anyway. So it's not that they made the decision that they're going to try to, quote unquote, protect the economy by opening up. They made the decision to allow people to become hungry enough to go back to work so that they never know what this government is actually capable of doing in terms of protecting it and providing for the people in these types of emergencies. Because if the government can provide for the people in these types of emergencies, why the hell can't the government provide for the people when we're not in emergency mode? That's precisely what the Democrats and Republicans have collectively agreed upon, which is why we haven't seen any significant action in response to the 26 million people who have lost their jobs and how many essential workers who are working and putting their lives at risk every single day, still on the job, unable to go home and quarantine. Listen, this could have been resolved in probably 2 months' time. If we had collectively as a nation said for 2 months, just 2 months, we are shutting everything down. We're going to artificially prop up the stock markets. We're going to make sure that every household has their essential needs. We're going to make sure that no one's going to get evicted. No one's going to get foreclosed on. No one is going to lose their car in a repossession. None of their lights are everything is just going to be frozen for 2 months. This entire thing would have passed. Look at South Korea. Hell, look at Senegal. I'll play a clip in a minute from what the efforts they're undertaking in Senegal. But instead of that, because that would have required that every American receive a check from the government and that our bills would have been frozen for 2 months and that for 2 months, no one would have participated. Because of that, in that is the revelation that most people don't have. That this government can do absolutely whatever the hell it wants to do. That money is not even a real thing. It is a construct. It is an agreement amongst us to get our participation in this system, to maintain and to encourage our participation in this system. That's it. And in times of crises, we could work around that. But so many people have made all of their wealth based on the simple idea of keeping hungry people hungry, working people working, desperate people desperate. And they have found a way to capitalize and make profits on all of that. And so it was entirely unthinkable to the ruling elite to let this country shut down for 2 months. And provide for this country for 2 months. And because of that, we're going to be stuck in this probably 2 years. Realistically speaking, it is out of control. There is no containment. We just have to ride this completely out at this point. They don't care about the economy for real because they know that they can write themselves a check through the Fed. They really just care about the fact that they have to make sure that the average American doesn't realize that we too can write ourselves a check through the federal government, who derives its power and its authority from the very people it is abandoning in this moment. Patron party up next, then my interview with Professor Adolph Reed. Stay tuned.
Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. very special welcome and thank you to our only patron that we got over the weekend. I want everybody to stand up, unless you're driving. Stay in your seat if you're driving. But if you're at home, bopping your head, I want everyone to thank you, to give a very special thank you to Deborah Dickerson for becoming our patron. Right there. I told you we're going to party regardless. Thank you to everyone who supports this show. Patrons, patrons past, patrons present, patrons future, all of you. Let's bop for a few more minutes here. You too can become a part of this prestigious and this prodigious patron family by going to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and getting access for as little as $3 a month, where you get twice the content without any of the advertisements like you're going to hear right here.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. It is my distinguished pleasure to welcome back to the show none other than the Professor Emeritus of Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, Adolph Reed Jr. Professor Reed, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been on the show several times. It's been some years. The last time you were on, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, we were talking about Hillary Clinton, and you had written a piece that encouraging the people to vote for the lying warmonger because of the obvious things that were at stake. And I think time has kind of borne out your argument to greater or lesser extent. I'm just curious, how do you feel about that argument then, as opposed to perhaps some people arguing in favor of voting for Joe Biden now?
Right. Well, I tell you, man, I was thinking, as you said that, as you reminded me of that, and here we are again. The thing that struck me about the Democratic race this time was that the establishment Democrats were absolutely clear from the very beginning. They wouldn't say this. They probably wouldn't even say it to themselves because, my dad often said that in one sense, ideology is a mechanism that harmonizes the principles that you want to believe you hold with what advances your actual interests. But so in that sense, I suspect they probably wouldn't even want to say it to themselves, but they were more afraid of a Sanders nomination than they were of a second Trump term. Mm-hmm. And so once that became the case, and they became clearer and clearer about it, right, as time went on. If it wasn't Biden, it was going to be another version of Biden, and what they wanted was was a candidate who would reassert what I'd call basically the Clintonite status quo, and that was a status quo that ran from Bill Clinton through Barack Obama through Hillary Clinton to Joe Biden. So that said, I mean, at the moment, I feel that I find it very difficult to vote for Biden, but I know I strongly suspect that's likely to change the closer we get to November. Yeah. One of the reasons I feel that way now is that I don't think Biden can win, barring some catastrophe that's bigger than a catastrophe that we're already living through. Yeah. So it just feels like it would be a waste. But then, if you say that and if people don't vote it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. But I mean, either way, right? So if Biden loses, right, then there are 4 more years with Trump, and God knows what that would be. If Biden wins somehow, excuse me, then we avoid 4 more years of Trump. But what I fear is that another 4 years of Clintonite neoliberalism will just kind of clear the decks for a more competent and thus more dangerous version of Trump in 2024. But, I don't know. I mean, I've I've also said to people, and I'm serious about this, this isn't hyperbole, I'm not 100% convinced that we're going to have an election in November anyway. So the question of voting for Biden, I would say at this point is cross that bridge when we get to it question.
Right. So I'm I completely understand your sentiment there. My gut is telling me that as this pandemic grows, that it may not even be reasonable without 100% mail-in ballots across the country to expect us to have the election in November. What's interesting is I'm kind of on the same side as you are this time. It's funny. I was with you in 2016 about voting for the warmongering neoliberal to a greater or lesser extent. I was with you because I thought, I felt the same way about Trump. But then now I feel like Joe Biden can't win. And I also feel that same sentiment, whether they admit it to themselves or not. The Democratic establishment was more terrified of Bernie Sanders than they were a second term of Donald Trump. And so part of me is like, let them have what they want. Right. That's kind of it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard not to fall into that. But are you in a position now? And I know you explained it, but I guess kind of want to ask directly, do you feel that the threat that Donald Trump poses is secondary or even equivalent to the damage that has been done to this country by the Democratic Party not being an actual opposition party, but a party complicit to neoliberalism?
Well, that's a very good question, Benjamin. I think there are two sides of the same coin, right? Because Trump is only be able to get away with this, right, because of the ways that the Democrats have operated over the last 30 years. But excuse me, it's just morning hoarseness. But and my allergies. But I don't know. I mean, when you look at the moves that Trump has already made in the federal courts, what he's done with the National Labor Relations Board, how he's threatening to defund the postal system, right, the postal service. There's a lot more damage that Trump can do, right? And Trump with the Republican Congress, right? I mean, I suspect the Democrats will hold the House. I don't know if they'll be able to turn the Senate. But yeah, I think there's more damage that a Trump presidency could do. I mean, the one thing we have going for us is that he is incompetent and crazy, and he's driven by what he imagines his ratings to be. So whenever he makes a warmongering statement, like he comes back the next day and backs off it, right? Because he doesn't really want to do anything to upset the apple cart. But he's also giving away the country to his corporate cronies, right? And digging a hole that's deeper and deeper for us. So I guess, I'm kind of talking myself into voting for Biden, right? Because that just seems like the least bad outcome. I mean, I don't like the idea,
right.
But I mean, it's funny, man. I was thinking a couple of days ago that, of the 13 presidential elections that I've been eligible to vote in, I've voted for the Democrats 6 times. I've voted for third-party candidates 2 times, and I've abstained 5 times. So I guess I'm not what you'd call your typical Democratic voter.
All right. We'll circle back to the interview momentarily. I want to play this clip of 2 different clips because I want you to see and experience what's happening on the international stage with regard to COVID-19 as compared to what's happening here in the United States. This first clip is a clip of a report from South Africa as a delegation of 217 Cuban health professionals arrived overnight in the country of South Africa. Take a listen in.
Here they are. Here they are, the medical practitioners from Cuba landing on South African soil to help the country deal with the coronavirus. This is certainly a historic moment that would definitely, we'll never see in our lifetime. Here they are disembarking from the South African Airways plane and getting ready to embark on the buses that will ferry them to the destination where they will be quarantined for the next 14 days. Sophie, what's your analysis of what you see?
You know that the World Health Organization has made an appeal to countries or member countries to assist each other. The Chinese did assist South Africa by sending medical supplies, and now we see Cuba sending medical personnel, people with vast experience, particularly on primary health care, where you really focus on communities rather than treating the disease, but deal with a situation where you are ensuring that you don't have these diseases. You can see the Cuban flag. You saw the pictures of Fidel Castro and Cubans who are working at the embassy shouting, "Viva Fidel, Viva Fidel, Viva Fidel." And there is a flag, a Cuban flag, two people holding the flag, a demonstration that Cuba is here and Cuba is here to support South Africa during these difficult times.
And if you watch the video online, you'll see Cuban doctors. This is not the first nation that that Cubans have flown to aid and assist. And quite frankly, we need that assistance here. It is remarkable how the United States, in all of its arrogance, stands as though it is exceptional when the death rate, not just the raw numbers, but the percentages per capita, the per capita number is going to that's where we're going to be exceptional. We're going to have an exceptional amount of deaths in this country because of the level of derangement and ignorance that seeps down to the core of our American culture, and the arrogance of America to look down on nations like Cuba because of economic reasons, because of ideological reasons, because of the ongoing feud from the Cold War, Fidel Castro, obviously the Cuban Revolution. But it is the height of arrogance, because in this moment, we are the ones who are in desperate need, and Cuba is the one that is in the position, that small little island is in a position to aid as many countries as they could actually get to. And most certainly, the United States would never accept assistance from Cuba. No, not so long as it's run by the Communist Party there, right? Because above all else, it's ideological. Above all else, it's capitalism above everything, even above the health of their own citizenry. From whom? This is the thing. The last thing, I know I said at the beginning of the show, but the other thing is that it's like you are not even taking care of the people who maintain your capitalistic system through our labor, through our consumption and our participation. You would rather let us die to squeeze the last dollar out of us before we die than to allow us to know for 1 second that the federal government is totally capable of changing our entire paradigm and providing for the people the very bare necessities, because no one is asking for the government to give them a car. No one is asking the government to give them a cell phone. What we're asking of the government is for us to press pause on this ridiculous capitalistic endeavor that we've been on for centuries, because if we don't push pause on it, then people are going to be hungry. The bread lines are going to go empty. The food pantries will go empty. People are going to starve. There's about, I think, 1 million pounds of chicken. And, Americans love their chicken. That Tyson Farms is saying they're going to have a shortage of about 1 million pounds coming up here real soon because their essential workers can no longer work. So we're getting ready to head headlong into a crisis, and it's all because of the arrogance of the capitalists that run this country. Because they don't want for a minute to, in the face of the Fed opening up the coffers and pouring trillions of dollars into the markets, and this bailout signed on to by both Republicans and Democrats, giving a bailout to billionaires and millionaires while giving everyone else a pittance $1,200, which isn't enough to pay most people's rent. So in the face of all of their exorbitant greed and obscene wealth, the federal government is looking at us saying, we can't do anything for you. Meanwhile, Cuba is flying around the world, taking care of nations that are in need. Here's a clip from Senegal. And I'll just put it the way Americans will put it, right? Donald Trump would say these are shithole countries. Outdoing the United States, that is. The educated elite in this country will call these developing nations, doing far more spectacular things to protect their citizenry than we do here in this well-developed non-shithole country. Listen in.
It's not just the Western world that has the scientific know-how to beat the virus. In Senegal, a laboratory has used its AIDS and Ebola experience to develop a $1 COVID-19 testing kit. Al Jazeera's Nicholas Hawk has more.
Senegal is doing what most countries can't, testing everyone, symptoms or not, entering a health center for the novel coronavirus. It has no shortage of testing kit thanks to this lab at the Institut Pasteur. Researchers are developing a $1 quick diagnostic kit, originally made to test for dengue fever. Patients drop blood or saliva onto the devices and wait for a bloodline to appear, like a pregnancy test, explains researcher Amadou Sall.
There is no need for a highly equipped lab. It's a simple test that can be done anywhere. The idea is to rapidly produce 2 to 4 million kits, not just for us, but for African countries, so that we can detect and isolate patients quickly.
The sick are administered a cheap anti-malarial drug called chloroquine, commonly found in sub-Saharan Africa where malaria is endemic. With only 50 ventilator machines for 16 million people, Senegalese engineers are using a 3D printing machine to produce more. While imported ventilators cost $16,000, this one is just $60. Senegal is counting the cost, and it's paying off. More than a month into the outbreak, the small West African nation suffered only 2 deaths, with most patients treated healed. Senegal has the largest rate of recovery in patients infected with the coronavirus in Africa, the 3rd in the world, ahead of countries like the United States and France. And while it has a tiny health budget compared to those countries, it has a wealth of experience in dealing with infectious diseases and outbreaks.
Meanwhile, in America,
restaurant owner in Houston, Texas, reopened his dining room for customers this weekend, despite the state's stay-at-home orders. And he joins us now. He is Matt Bryce, owner and operator of Federal American Grill in Houston. Matt, great to see you this morning. So let's just start by telling us what it was like this weekend. What happened when you reopened? What was your capacity like? How'd it go?
Well, I got to say, a lot of people were grateful. They were just so happy to be out of their homes, as you can imagine. So the vibe was just amazing. Everybody was just glad to be social again. And that's what we've all, come to see, that we're actually very social human beings. And, people, it's time to get back out.
You defied, I guess, for lack of a better word, a judge's order, and you reopened sooner than the judge in your county wants you to. And I think you risked a jail sentence, a 6-month jail sentence by reopening early. So what are your thoughts? Why did you want to take that risk?
Well, I didn't put that much thought into that side of things. This is not to defy. Everybody's using this word defy. It's not in my nature to do that whatsoever. I'm not trying to break any laws. I'm a business person, and I have a lot of employees that are hurting at the moment, a lot. You can see the economy just absolutely crashed. The first 2 weeks when we were told to, basically hunker down, as we say here, everybody did, and we have all the way through about 6 weeks. We wanted to make sure that the medical employees weren't inundated with hospital beds and whatnot, so we were doing our part there to make sure that they were all safe until we felt that it was a little bit safe to open. And I got to tell you that when I say that our employees are in bad shape, I can tell you story after story. So I felt it was my duty to get us open.
Yeah, his duty to get them open. Listen, we're screwed here in America because the pandemic is everywhere. And in the face of it, we have two things. We have this prevailing argument that is allowed by both the left and the right, particularly the right, but it's underscored by the left, that the only way these people can get some type of income is if they open these jobs back up. And so we have to open up the economy to help people out. When the goddamn government has opened up the Federal Reserve and bailed out Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars, we are more than capable. See, it is a level of absurdity, people. It's a level of absurdity in the face of actual death that I can't even wrap my head around. The fact that people are more interested in hanging on to a fallacious argument in the face of the exact opposite. In other words, the fallacious argument is they have to open back up for people to get some money to consume. When in the face of the reality is the Fed opened up their coffers and wrote trillions of dollars, gave trillions of dollars to Wall Street, and the federal government passed legislation that gave billions, and actually no trillions. It's going to be leveraged into trillions to millionaires, billionaires. And yet there's more of a desire to be ideologically right, in the sense of my team says we need to open back up because people are hungry and people need to make sure that they can pay their bills. And then you have, that's from the right. And then you have some people on the left who are navel gazing. And I really want to tell them to just shut up and think this through, because people opening these restaurants means people die. The coronavirus is going to kill people, but people struggling is a choice that this government is forcing on us because it refuses to do anything for the average man. The economy, not even the economy crashing, but people not having money to eat with and to consume with is literally a choice of this government. Whereas people catching this virus, at this point, it's a choice of stupidity and allowing these ridiculous arguments to go unchallenged because people say, oh, we got to open back up in order for people to be able to survive. No, the government has demonstrated that it is more than capable of allowing people, corporations and Wall Street and the markets to survive without them lifting a goddamn finger. I cannot believe that in the face of actual death, we are choosing the most stupid and all right. Anyway, let's get back to it's absurd. It's a level of absurdity that you would think that in the face of death, we would come to our senses. But in the face of death, this country has doubled down on its stupidity. Apparently, I just had to get that off my chest. It's all true, obviously, but I just had to say that. Let's get back. Let's take a musical break and get back to this interview with Professor Adolph Reed.
We'll make it up. You put us together. We'll make it up. You put us together. We'll make it up. You put us together.
Here's the frustration, and I guess this question really doesn't have. I don't think there's going to be a direct answer for it, but I just kind of want the audience to think about it because it's something I've been thinking about, and I would like your opinion on it. What the hell do we do then, Professor? Because we have been working diligently through the electoral system. We've also had plenty of organizations and boots on the ground doing organizing, grassroots organizing, local races, mutual aid organizations. I mean, the people have been doing the very best we can do to work through this system. And when you see how the powerful are protecting themselves, and I think COVID-19 actually exposes the extent to which they will throw us out to the wolves. They would let us go back into this plague, this pandemic, in order to help them meet their bottom lines. You get to a point of frustration where I am now, like, what do they really expect us to do next? What would you say to young people? And I know that's kind of a cliche way to frame it, but, you got some young revolutionaries out here who aren't as patient as I am or as you may be. Right. What would you say to us who feel like we throw our hands up and this electoral process is just not the way to do it?
Right. Well, that's a good question. I mean, what I would say to people with the revolutionary aspirations is slow down, right? Because the electoral, and I say also that, yeah, there are boots on the ground, but the problem is that most of the grassroots stuff that's going on out there is either linked to electoral politics or in some ways connected with NGO-driven service providing, or is just bogus Potemkin stuff, or some combination of all three, right? So there's like an appearance of grassroots action that I'm not sure is borne out in reality. I think what we got a lot of is people who, and when I say Potemkin, I mean, I'm pretty serious about this, who, because the internet makes this easy, right? You stage something that looks like a demonstration. You proclaim yourself a spokesperson for this mass group, right? And then that becomes the the pathway that you follow to get onto MSNBC, basically. And again, people aren't necessarily conscious of that this is what they're doing. And partly, this is what politics or activist politics has come to be in the last 20 years. So to that extent, it's kind of hard to fault young people for not knowing any better. But the point is they don't know any better. But what I mentioned, I think that what we need to do, right, the key is that we didn't exactly elect our way into this mess. We're not really going to elect our way out of it, at least not directly. And I know it doesn't give any comfort when we look toward 2020 if there is going to be an election. But the fact is that we need to build a movement with organic roots in workplaces and communities around the country. And we need to build it on the basis of issues, concrete issues that affect the lives and circumstances and resonate with working people of all sorts, right? I mentioned before we started recording that the Debs Jones Douglas Institute has been doing a campaign in South Carolina around the Medicare for All. And between the beginning of December and the primary at the end of February, actually more than 13,000 South Carolinians signed pledges indicating that they would vote only for candidates who support Medicare for All.
Right.
The state AFL-CIO, which has a black president now, a great guy, Charles Brave, and that's interesting. He's the only black state Fed president in America, as I understand it, is 100% behind this. And we've gotten a lot of broad-based support now. And that's the kind of issue, right, that can bring people together. Like you noticed, I'm sure that during the primaries, the Democratic primaries, the consistent winner of just about every primary was Medicare for All.
Right.
Right. And people know it, right? And they don't need, to hear testimony from people who have horror stories. They don't need it explained to them about how you pay for it. What they need is an explanation of how it works and confidence that it's something that we can win if we fight for it politically. And that's what we need to have more of, right, around that issue as well as others. But it seems to me that especially in this healthcare crisis now,
right,
and the pandemic, people are even more attuned to the necessity,
right,
for substantial change in the healthcare system, and more open to this than they were even before.
Right. I like the way you address that. Like, slow down, and are we actually organizing on the ground, like for real, for real? I kind of chuckled in the middle of it because I accidentally ended up on MSNBC a couple times, and it wasn't really my goal to get there, but I felt attacked. No, I know you weren't coming after.
Well, yeah, no, look, it's good, but it's good when people like you are able to slip through.
You see, they didn't have me back either, so.
Right, well, yeah, that's the other thing about it.
Right, but to your point, as far as what was happening, I always love our conversations because they flow directly to the point. Always, when you mention the 13,000 people who signed the statement saying that they would only vote for Medicare for All in South Carolina, And we did see that Medicare for All won in South Carolina, even though Bernie Sanders did not win. He lost significantly. And then the context that you put it in, more people are attuned right now, particularly because of COVID-19. I think the most recent numbers are 26 million people have lost their jobs. So no telling how many family members, in addition to them, have lost their health care, their employer-based health care. Newsweek put out some data today. 69% of Americans want Medicare for all, including 46% of Republicans. So it is a popular idea across the board. And yet the people in power in both parties have done everything they possibly could to stop it. Obviously, we know why the insurance company, the lobbyists are making sure that they stop this as long as they possibly can. But I want to go to South Carolina because that was a very significant moment. That was the turning point in this race. I had a chance to be there in Columbia, South Carolina, the weekend.
Right, that's right.
And,
like we missed each other, actually.
Oh, really? Yeah. I didn't even know you were there. We would have loved to have linked up. Matter of fact, I was thinking as you were talking, after this is all over, we have to find ourselves in at least the same city at some point. And if you're in New Orleans now, I'll definitely be there for at least one Mardi Gras as soon as this pandemic is over. So I'll catch up with you there.
Good. Yeah.
But in terms of South Carolina, we saw Jim Clyburn and the black vote being used to prop up Joe Biden, and in a very successful fashion. I mean, I think it was a brilliant move in South Carolina, as well as this consolidation right after South Carolina, where all the candidates dropped out. But in the New Republic, you were talking about most recently Bookerism and the black elite. And I want to know, in this article, you're making some critical arguments that I think can be applied to how the black elite, or at least the black leadership class or misleadership class of today, is leveraged as a way of, one, being representative of the entire black community whenever they need it to make that representation, but then two, also for the amalgamation of political power to stop progressive movements. I want to know if you could kind of speak to the essence of that article that you wrote in terms of what we saw happening in South Carolina with the black elite there.
Right, sure. Well, it's interesting. I mean, Cedric Johnson in 2016 did a really good article in Jacobin after the South Carolina primary called "Fear and Pandering in the Palmetto State," and Willie Leggett and I did one just after the South Carolina primary this time in Common Dreams that try to make sense of this. I mean, in one sense, like, the problem is this notion of the black vote, right? As some people have pointed out, the Black American or the population, the total population of black people in the United States is equivalent to the entire population of Canada. So from that perspective, it makes as much sense to talk about the black vote as a singular block as it does to talk about the Canadian vote as a singular block, right? There are all kinds of black people with all kinds of interests, concerns, preferences. But the black vote, then, in this notion of the black vote, all those particular interests and concerns that black people have vanish, right? They all dissolve into, at best, a handful of symbolic issues that political brokers can use to get leverage for themselves in the name of a black constituency, right? So from that perspective, and this is like another problem with electoral engagement, like from that perspective, when you start out, trying to appeal to something called the black vote, then you're already saying that you can't talk to black people about healthcare, or free public higher education, or student loan forgiveness. And by the way, what we found in South Carolina too, and this probably speaks to another reason that the Democratic establishment is so dead set against Medicare for All is that once people start talking about the healthcare system being organized in a different way that takes the profit out, and that's organized on the basis of a public good framework,
mm-hmm.
then they naturally start talking about stuff like free public higher education and student loan forgiveness and right to a job, right?
Right.
So in that sense, cutting off access or cutting off the movement for Medicare for All at the pass is a way to avoid bigger problems from the standpoint of the ruling class there. I said it. But so, anyway, it's also the case that I think we've seen pretty clearly that people make their electoral calculations as voters on the basis of a logic that's different from how they think about the issues that really affect their lives on a daily basis.
Interesting.
And when you think about it, it makes sense because we've had more than 50 years since the Voting Rights Act was passed. And over those 50 years, the black political class has increasingly been telling us that electoral politics is not the domain for to engage in trying to make your life better. Right? I mean, it's kind of weird how it operates. But you remember in 2016 when Clyburn and John Lewis and Cedric Richmond from here, who at that point was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, all said about Sanders that it's irresponsible to tell young people or tell black people that there should be free public goods. So if where we've come 50 years after the Voting Rights Act is that there's a black political class that can feel that kind of confident in declaring what's basically a don't ask me for shit line about black people's political aspirations, that it makes sense. That insofar as people vote, they're going to vote on the basis of a logic that's familiar with respect to what they voted for or with respect to how they voted previously. So that's part of the problem, right? With respect to the Sanders campaign, I don't know if there was anything else that they could have done. I don't know if there was any other, right? Because if they hadn't sort of gone through the motions of making the ritual appeals to this abstraction called the black vote, then there would have been all kinds of hustlers out there, like from MSNBC, right, to around the corner, who would attack them as racist for not taking African Americans' issue seriously.
All right, that's it for today's show, for the public show. If you want to go ahead and get the full access to I think there's 30 more minutes of interview, you can go to patreon.com and get the full interview. Patrons, stay tuned after the music. We'll continue with more Adolph Reed, more political analysis, a little bit of stargazing and everything else. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a beautiful audience. I will see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.